All right. We're here with Jenny today from Land Together, and this is Echoes of Society, a little podcast we do on YouTube talking about restoration and redeemable qualities in human beings and how we facilitate those from incarcerated individuals to law abiding citizens in society. And for those who don't know, like many layers of an onion, it's a process. And Land Together uses gardening techniques to literally talk about planting seeds and showing growth and good soil and loam and how all of that creates fruit. So one can look at any analogy in the Bible and say, well, good fruit and good works and good deeds, and apply those to actual factual planting processes. And anyway, Jenny's here to help us explain and talk about some fun facts and some nature adventures that we had the other day. Part of I guess you have the inside, participants, and you have outside participants, people who were formerly incarcerated that are still continuing their journey and growing and learning. I mean, growing never stops, pruning and everything that goes on with planting and trees. And it really does exist in the real world, and it's all very relevant. So anyway, I appreciate what you're doing and welcome everybody, Jenny.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you and see you again today, Jesse.
Yep, good to see you too. Thanks for your time.
If I lean down like this a little bit, it's because I'm petting my dog.
Oh,
She's almost always at my side.
I
So
thought you,
either she appears taking a nap behind me
yeah,
or I'm
don't
like
judge.
this because she's like, pet me.
No judgment. I thought you were reaching for something to drink. Right. It's kind of funny that when I was talking there, the process kicked back into my head, and I remember we were talking about loam and good soil. When I was in San Quentin, we had the raised garden beds, and then we would feel, what dirt feels like, and sand, and then um, clay, and then like realize it's a mixture of all of these that creates good something, the ohm or the loam. So it really is important because out here where I live in Hanford, Kings County, there's a lot of, well, it used to be a lot of walnut trees, and that clay soil is so thick and dense, it would hold on to moisture and nutrients, which is essential for walnut trees. But due to the water restrictions and the dam, like we were literally at the lake the other day, the reservoir, Milton, and we've seen what a dam really looks like.
Yeah.
And so with the water restrictions that are all throughout the valley, a lot of farmers here are switching over to almonds or pistachios, which is a sandier base. You know what I mean? Allows you need less water, and it produces, well, basically as much as a walnut tree does. But it's a different fruit. But it's more cost effective for farmers and really essential because they're creating like a Saharan desert type atmosphere for farming, and they can't grow the walnut trees anymore. But
Yeah.
to speak to the transformation of a lot of us, like me,
Mm.
hard headed and just really thick and dense. You know what I mean? like I would say the clay, and it takes a lot of love and volunteers and information and stories and other people's personal journeys to add sand or to add, you know what I mean, fertilizer or to add the essential compost. You know what I mean? To make to turn clay into something that you can plant other stuff in. And for me, I mean, the Inside Garden program and Land Together was a huge part of that. Um, and one of the things that me and another guy were talking about the other day, he was talking about when you go to jail, how like you're stripped out or stripped down, and he was talking about like clothing and how embarrassing that is, to be standing there, butt naked in front of somebody. But so much so, more so, I would say the court process, like they literally hold transcripts or police reports or evidence reports or whatever there is, describing what could or potentially is, and based on the evidence and facts for whoever, whether they admit to it or not, whether the report was accurate or not. The most embarrassing and horrific things that you can imagine, you know what I mean? And that stuff that nobody ever wants to admit to. So when you're incarcerated, you not only are butt naked, bare in front of some grown man telling you to bend over and squat and cough, And then you've got officers that have access to your file to see the worst thing that you ever did, and the most embarrassing, shameful thing that you would ever be able to just acknowledge, like, how did I do this? And to have other human beings come in and treat you compassionately and with love and care and kindness is like such is one of the most nourishing things. Is a I'm not a huge like Bible scholar. I don't know all the verses, but there's something in a proverb where it says like, um, good news from far away is like a cool drink of water on a hot day. And I
Mm.
feel like that's what you guys bring, is this refreshing nourishment to the soul that is just, you can't put a price on it. And it just continues. It's not just once or twice, it's a continuing thing. And going on this trip to Millerton Lake and taking that walk through the Table Mountain area,
Yeah.
it's just even more so evidence of that. Like, like I was going through so much at home and in this valley, and
Mm.
just was so much stuff. So to have that opportunity to go do that and look around, like, oh my God, this was here the whole time. Like I could have been doing this. It was really eye opening and like just soul opening. You know what I mean? So I do appreciate that. But like from your guys' perspective, like, what does it feel like to be able to do that from your end? You know what I mean?
Oh my God. Uh, honestly, it feels amazing to be able to do that. I feel like doing the work I do as a program manager, going out, I have, my two programs, my two groups. I go out to C Yard and D Yard. And
In Avenel, yeah, in Avenel prison, yeah, yeah.
Avenal State Prison. And, my the participants in my program come out and have, like around 20-ish in each group, people. And it's just, you know, when I see them, I just feel this, yeah, joy. It's like a little reunion every week. You're building relationships just like when you work with someone or you have class with them. I mean, I'm a program manager. I facilitate the program, but also, we're all peers, mixed generation. So I feel like they're kind of like my colleagues, my coworkers, my friends. I feel like they're training me while I'm also facilitating and bringing information, in for them. But the relationship building that happens in those settings anywhere, is it's always, unique. And it's for me, I'm fortunate. It can be just, I guess I think of this as a very reciprocal give and take of support and of nourishment. And yeah, I feel fortunate to be able to do it. So when I see them when I walk out every week, I just can't help it. Honestly, Jesse, everything else just disappears. Everything's gone. Everything beyond the garden, beyond those walls. I start with C Yard. D Yard is gone. I am just there with each of those folks, and it's almost a relief to absolutely just give my full attention fully right there and just check in with people. And, I love to yuck it up out in the garden. We spend a lot of time in the garden. I love to walk around and just like bend around and sniff stuff. And we look underneath, really explore the garden every week and give it our tender loving care, really give it TLC. And, um, it's like just such great fortune for me. I really, really love it. And then the same thing happens when I get to D Yard, when I get there, it's just like C Yard, everything, anything that came up, anything in that class, I took notes on that, engaged in that, and then I get to D Yard and it's gone. I am just there with that group, and I yeah, like I said, kind of one of the first times we met, and I know it was sort of like I actually was replaying that in my mind, but when we were talking about we were having an icebreaker, and we were like introducing ourselves, and um, I said something like, "Oh, guess I'm really a lucky person because I was like in the right place at the right time," or something like that, or I'm right where I'm supposed to be right now. And I was thinking about that through various moments of the walk, yeah, as you're just like flowing in your thoughts. And it came back to me having said that, and I'm like, God, like, like I, I am fortunate, and there's really no good deed that is like, whatever this. being able to give that nourishment like you're talking about, being able to do this work, that is yes, it is a giving because I am going to a population that doesn't, get as much attention, period, whether it's from visitors or just positive feedback, from staff, the
Yeah.
environment, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like it's yeah, it gives to me there's nothing that's really great that you do for others. It doesn't also make you feel good. And that's part of being a human and that's part of the joy, and yeah, so I love it.
You know, there was a like a story that I had heard once upon a time, and it didn't, it made sense. I mean, I understood it in practice, and then it didn't really lock in 100% full fold until I was in the gardening class, in H unit up there at San Quentin. But it was talking about how, and it kind of attests to when you get locked up to like being stripped down, similar like in the front yard. My dad has a mulberry tree, and every year or so he loves to have it pruned. I mean, just all the branches completely just like a bald head. You know what I mean? When we were kids, we used to just shave our heads. It was the easiest thing in the world to do. You know, you're kids, you don't need a haircut. We ain't got money for the barber. Just now, and it's simple and it's clean, and he's not wrong. But one of the effects of pruning a mulberry tree like that is the roots. You know what I mean? They dig deeper down into the dirt because they're not getting the nutrients from photosynthesis and the leaves and the sun and the things you're supposed to learn in school when you're a kid. But they don't teach you that, I think, in science when you're young anyway. Is that the effects of those roots growing or digging deeper into the soil for nutrients to survive? Because the tree's going to survive. It's going to do whatever it can. It'll steal those nutrients from a rose bush. It'll take them away from your garden. It'll raise your concrete. You know what I mean? Your sidewalk.
For
It'll
sure.
it'll raise up the driveway, and it'll ruin the foundation of a house if you let it, and that what you guys bring, and I'm not trying to overemphasize, I'm just like, literally, you're talking about being in the moment, like, and what people I don't think understand when I see, and comments on the internet about people going to prison. I see them getting sentenced all the time. It's like on the news, it's on Facebook, it's on these little reels, and they're like, yeah, he got 189 years, that's good, and one less person, or put a bullet in his head, it's cheaper. They don't realize that these individuals committing these crimes don't have that nurturing. You know what I mean? They're like those trees that have been buzzed down, and those roots, they're digging for any kind of like whatever to fulfill a need that they have as a human being. If a tree has a need and it's going to do what it can to survive, same, so even more so is a human being who's intellectual and thoughtful. And so for you guys to be able to rehumanize us and remind us and let our branches grow out and let our leaves grow out and provide those rays of sunlight to feed us and say, hey, I don't have to survive anymore. You know what I mean? I don't have to do crazy drastic things to fill the needs, to feel loved as a human being, because you guys do that. So I think that's admirable, and I really do appreciate that. If I when we met, if I didn't say thank you, just let me say thank you.
Well, thank you. You're so welcome, and I thank you too.
But I was gonna say, when I was at Avenal, I was on that D yard at one point. It was 2012, and I was on a level 3 in Jamestown, and then the state laws had changed and points had dropped, and then I went from a level 3 to a level 2, like kind of overnight, and they just shipped a bunch of us out, where there's buses leaving every day. And at the same time, there was like level 4s, and life without parole that they allowed to come down to 3s and 2s as well. So there was a lot of different integration down there on that yard at that time. And unfortunately, I mean, for me, I ended up like relapsing, and like wasn't a lot to do besides jog the track, do some pull-ups, do some push-ups. We had sandbags to work out. But there was one day I was walking by the bathroom. There was a football game on, and I had smelt some weed, and I turned, and then my instant thought back then, I was a hunter gatherer at that time. It was like my instant reaction was like, where it's at. So that was my kind of reintroduction into getting high after being locked up for a couple of years, and that kind of went on for a couple of years. So I didn't get sober till it was St. Patrick's Day of 2014 over on the 2 yard, which I guess would be B yard, where the furniture factory is. And I'm grateful and thankful for that. I'm a happier person today. I feel like renewed from so many things, sobriety being one of them, this program being another. But just to talk about, you're talking about D yard and being there, it kind of took me back there. And I remember just feeling that lonely feeling empty. You know what I mean? There's a lot of like desert wasteland looking scenery around there.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of celebrating. There's not a lot of people at your side. There's not a lot of groups. I mean, I think they had AA and NA when I was there, and then I think they had the SAT program, and that you see those volunteers walking past. But that was like and it was like very strict rules about approaching people and talking to people. Like there was a lot of enforcement. So to know that the gardening program's there, and I could picture. Do you guys have raised garden beds, or do you guys have them just in the dirt?
Um, at right now, we are working very much to rehabilitate the soil
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And so it's gone from raised beds that were built, took on a couple of incarnations to taking those apart and building up beds directly in the soil. So we've been, I don't know if you guys were making compost when you were there.
At Avenal, there was no gardening program when I was there.
Oh yeah,
Um,
okay.
so we weren't doing anything but just walking the yard and
Oh
doing.
yeah. So
But yeah.
it's gone through a few versions, but in the last year and a half since I've been there, the gardeners really wanted to change it up and plant more. And so we really focused on, okay, let's build this soil. Let's let go of these very specific raised beds, which are beautiful, but are just more rigid, like, and let it go and let's make pathways and let's get into the earth more. And we have a compost going too, which is super incredible on both my programs. The participants have built um, big layered compost piles, and we collect the organics kitchen scraps from each kitchen and add them in and mix it in. And then when we have garden project days, we get out all of the soil and the compost that's been made, that's layered underneath all of the decomposition that's happening in those piles, and use that beautiful rich compost out in the garden. So it's really we really, using your metaphor about, soil and readiness and putting all kinds of care and nutrients and nourishment into the soil so that you can really grow something, that we really see that happen even with the compost and use that metaphor a lot about, even things that you may feel have gone bad in your life or experiences you've had or things that you think are just to be thrown away or rotten actually, have an organic purpose and can be reworked into the soil mixed with other things
Mm,
and can break down and completely decompose and transform and become new nourishment, become something new that you can put on to grow. You could put out into your garden beds to grow things again. And that is a really powerful metaphor for a lot of the participants. They really get into it. And these composts are immaculate. The guys
mm,
care so much about it. They will cut up everything and just carefully tend and manage it and mix it and it's fantastic. And personally, as someone who really gets into that kind of way of thinking about life and also is very into composting at home
mm,
and has been for a long time. Um, it's very gratifying. It's very satisfying and awesome to use that soil in the beds. So yeah, so we do have some pretty good sized beds in the ground at this time. There are some built, raised up, more decorative um, beds or containers that will have like succulents or mint growing in them. Believe it or not, there's a beautiful carved kind of walkway with rosemary and herbs that are the bordering the walkway and we have some gorgeous rose bushes that when you first walk in, if you can recollect, that 440 when you were on D Yard,
yep.
the house where the classes were,
Oh yeah.
when you look at it, there was like just a cement, walkway from like the gate where you get checked in, where you can then walk up the walkway to one of your two classrooms. Well, now there's just beautiful white rose bushes that are all along the borders of that walkway, and then it guides you out to just multiple flower beds, sitting places. There's a bird bath. It's really an oasis. And,
Wow.
it's always kind of changing and evolving season to season, of course, as we plant new things and as the gardeners kind of do little redesigns, and upgrades and updates. But it's a gorgeous garden, really by anyone's standards, I would say, especially considering that it's a very dry, arid climate.
Yeah.
And so it takes, planting certain things and really focusing on the water and, the nutrients to really get a harvest.
Yeah. And by gardeners, for somebody, if they're not paying close attention, they hear gardener, they think like there's some paid person who comes from the outside and does it. You're talking about the participants who live and are incarcerated there.
Exactly. I'm talking about those participants, and I think of them in so many ways. I'm like, well, they're students, they're gardeners, they're horticulturists, they're participants in the
Yep.
program, they're residents of that environment, of that. They've got their house, they got their room, they got,
Yep.
but yeah, I often think of them as, the gardeners because it's funny. Some of them I know, like a lot of us, like kind of initially it's a really cool process. We'll really just view the garden as like, this is this work I need to do. Like, okay, like almost like they're a landscaper and it's a job and they need to, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do all this work and stuff. And so I find that just like my personality and just the way that I'm relating with them, I find myself encouraging them to look at themselves not as like, they're not landscape staff. They're they're program gardeners. They're freaking gardeners. I'm like, enjoy. You don't have to work that hard. Like,
Hmm.
smell the garden, sit in the lollygag in the garden a little bit, just like let
Yeah.
yourself take your time with the task at hand and
Yeah.
think of yourself more as gardening as opposed to like, you're a landscaper with this much time to like rake up all this or do all this. That's not necessarily, the point of this garden, but it's interesting.
The pruning aspect and the timing aspect, like you're saying, it goes hand in hand. It reminds me of a scene from the Karate Kid when Daniel-san was Mr. Miyagi and he had the bonsai tree.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, how should I do it? And he was like, well, just look at it, and just whatever you see, do that. And that's kind of like the gardening thing. Like when you sit there, you can literally breathe it in. Like you sit there and you breathe it in, and like the visual landscape, like either agrees with you or it'll speak to you and say, well, no, what if this was over here? It's really awesome to be connected that way. And something else too about the timing, with compost, like the number one rule with compost is timing. It's not like a clock or a watch you look at and go, okay, in 16 minutes, I mean, this banana peel, you know what I mean? Or in six
Yes.
months, this newspaper will mold with this. It's like you really don't, you just have to let it sit, and then heat and time and everything else. But and to speak to what you were saying about when we did our check-in before we went on that nature walk, you were saying something about this is the time I'm supposed to be here. And there's a Greek word I learned from a separate group. It was called Kairos. It was a men's group that came in and they all spoke to us about their personal stuff and about God and everything and forgiveness and forgiving yourself, like, and how huge those things are in community. But Kairos is a word that really is an ancient Greek word that just means it's not like a clock timing. It's just the right time. You know what I mean? A lot of people say God's time, not our time, but it's that compost time. You know what I mean? It's going to be done when it's done. You know what I mean?
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. I
Mm.
love that. That's beautiful. And then there's no mistaking it because you're gonna hit that layer and you're just gonna you smell it, you see it, you feel it, and you know it's ready. Um, I like that. Yeah, it's since I came, I was reflecting on this recently because I can really officially say this because it's all I think everything's pretty much been signed on the lines, but I've accepted um a slight transition in my work with Land Together, and so I'll actually begin to facilitate the program we have at the Women's Prison in Chowchilla
Wow.
along with the Avenal programs.
Dang.
I know. So I'm like, whoa, whew, let's go. Let's do it. I'm like, I'm with the ladies now. Look out. Look out. Look out. So, but I through through the last many years, I was reflecting on this because I wrote like a little cover letter and I was still interviewing for this position, even though, they were very much sort of pulling me toward doing it, but um, as I wrote the letter, I was thinking about, this last year and a half since I came to work for this organization. And I had been volunteering a little bit before that, with Land Together. And it's just, I used to think when I was volunteering that I would, that saying like that you're living your best life.
Yeah.
That was like almost like the catchphrase for me at that time. I'm like, oh, I am living my best life when I'm going to this program because the feeling of being with the guys and just being in the garden or doing the meditation, knowing that I'm bringing something so simple, which is just connection, person to person connection, positivity, just meeting someone where they're at in the moment for us to do something that we want to do together, which is garden, meditate, work on this, inner gardening concept, learn plant systems, all the things that our program teaches, our curriculum
Yeah.
is like it's the best. Like it was just so fun. So I would think, oh God, I am loving this. And I think, as I was reflecting on that, I'm just like, as you said, with this Kairos, just the right time.
Yeah.
Through my career, I've facilitated a lot of different kinds of groups. I've been basically like a community educator in a lot of different contexts, working with kids, working with parents, particularly moms. I worked as like a lactation counselor and educator for a long time, helping moms breastfeed their kids.
Mm,
Uh, like just never a teacher in the classroom. That was never anything, to be honest, that I wanted to do. And I loved teachers and I loved teachers and I did work at a school for 6 years, but it was always working with kids who needed an alternative way of learning, an alternative way of learning to read, kids
mm,
who were like, just I can't tell you like it was they would always put me in with just like some like sassy middle schoolers who were struggling in school or whatever, and I know what was going on, so
yeah.
many challenges, so many hard times, wrote a lot of letters for kids who were having a hard time with youth court systems and juvenile systems and stuff, and I just always felt myself there with them. I'm like that's just what can I say? That's just where my own, broken heart gets healed up. You know what I'm saying? Is just giving to with them. And so I feel like, through all of these different experiences and then even working as an outdoor educator for the zoo here in Fresno for many years, several years, 5 years, has just somehow, I didn't know, it was completely guiding me, along with personal experiences as I've shared a little bit with you, in a group, but just with my family, having had people who I was so close with who were incarcerated, and just realizing
Yeah.
just, yeah, the humanity just through my own personal experience. I'm like, wow. And now doing this work. And then I get to meet, people like you, and it continues. It's not like this stopping point, like, okay, now I'm doing these amazing programs. Great. I'm like, well, yeah, no, we all keep growing. We keep doing our inner revolutions over and over. And, and oh, okay, people, they were incarcerated, they come out, they have these creative endeavors, all of these goals, all these things we're participating in together. Um, it's very encouraging, it's just, and I think I'm going on and on right now.
No, no, no.
So,
You're doing great.
but yeah, in this time right now when there's just so much divisiveness and there's so much war and there's just so much pain, and it's really easy, to be honest, for me, I can rage. Oh, I can rage. I can go off on the way things are. I have a very strong personal point of view when it comes to politics and all of that.
Yeah.
But like the hope, the idea of, the prison of our mind, no
Yeah.
matter no matter where we're at, we can really get really hard and rigid on ourselves and really imprison ourselves in thoughts and in patterns and in behaviors. And just like you can be in such a restricted place, like you were saying, you can be in the gardens, you could be in prison, even you could be, but like begin to free your mind or build relationship that helps you feel that you've expanded. And right now, I feel like very fortunate too, because so many people are so, so unhappy. There's so much discontent. And like I said, though I certainly have my own share of challenges and discontent at times, I feel literally every time I go to work that I feel hope. I'm like, people truly, is it ironic? I don't know, but it's like really I'm going into a prison working with people who are incarcerated for any number of reasons, including, whatever, legitimate or not legitimate reasons, all these kinds of things. And everyone who's in my program chooses to be there, wants to be there, is seeking self-awareness, is seeking to discover themselves, to learn something more, to have tactile experience, connection with the earth, is open and wants to have relationship and build community. And like I'm like, that's like the best parts of being a human being, And out there in the world, but just there's not enough of that, to be
Yeah.
honest. I'm like, wow, this is where I'm getting the hope. This is where I'm getting hope about, knock on wood, this is where I'm getting hope about men a lot of the time. You know what I'm saying? Like right in there with like people who are down to be vulnerable, share their feelings, share their process, be in the garden, give the best that they can in that setting. And it far surpasses so much, that I've encountered in relationship with work or, you know, peers, out in whatever, free life. And
Yeah.
I know that I have that privilege of being able to leave that place and reflect from a certain context, every week when I leave. So I don't say that as to be some kind of, rainbows of, oh, how amazing everything is over there that they're able to just give. It's not that. I think, considering how restrictive the circumstances are, people who are showing up trying to be really seeking that enlightenment, they're
Yeah.
already having it. You know what I mean? It's like an ongoing thing. They're already having it. And it gives me hope to go out in the world and deal with a bunch of schmucks in the world who are walking around who haven't, they have their karmic debt they'll repay at some point, but, justice is not always served.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I don't know. So I'll stop there. Kairos.
What you're talking about brings up so many points in my brain. There's so many things in different directions I'm thinking, like these avenues of conversation. And one of them was you're talking about the gardeners earlier. And I remember at San Quentin there was a guy. He because certain officers, there was where the cops come in and out to each unit. It's like a locked area. Visitors come in that way near the visiting room, but there's like a water hose spigot or whatever they call it is up
Uh-huh.
there as well. So in order to water the garden area, you got to get the hose out from the unit office and then the key to turn the little spigot faucet thing on. And not every officer in the world wants to do that. A lot of them are like, "Don't
Oh yeah.
bother me with that shit." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they are focused on their job and their 401k, and that's it. Anything outside of that ain't their job, and they'll let you know that. So there was a particular individual gardener. Everybody knew him as a gardener. Like literally, like if you saw him, you would call him the gardener. And he had so much time. Like I don't know if he was ever going to get out, uh, you know, ever, but maybe something's going to happen in his favor. He didn't have any hope as far as getting out. Like his whole thing in life was just taking care of the garden. And if you saw anything changed or new additions or a little pathway here or some succulents over there or something blooming, you would watch him on any given day have those little bowls that he would cook the top ramen in, filled with water, carrying them out to these